We have two? Yeah, two. Hussein Ali. You know him, right? Hussein Ali, yeah. He's my board member. Wow. Okay. What a small world. How are you guys? Yeah. Thank you so much for making it. It really means the world. He's the kid who I grew up with. Wow. What a small world. Wow. Have you met brothers with hairs? I just met him now. Yeah, you heard about him. Really great community member, brother. I know about you now. Alhamdulillah. Yeah, fantastic. When I told him about you, I'm like, what the small world. Wow. Yeah. I've heard from quite a few people who are doing great work in the community. They're trailblazing.
I raised over $35 million from the city.
Auzubillahi minash shaitanir rajeem. Bismillahir rahmanir rahim. Assalamu alaikum, brothers and sisters in Islam. Wa alaikum assalam. How is everybody doing today? Alhamdulillah, good to hear. Welcome to our first seminar for economic development in light of the AhlulBayt, the encouraging entrepreneurship. We have our esteemed guests over here, all three of them. If you guys could introduce yourselves one by one.
Muhammad Rizvi with the Council of People's Organization, and many of you guys, I think, been to the FBI Youth Career Day, so I run those programs.
Shabir Kermani, I think you should know me by now. No,
I'm Zuhair Ladakh. I am a private equity investor, and I've been doing that for 25 years.
We thank you very much for coming out today for our seminar, and we're looking forward to all the knowledge you guys will give us in the community. Just so we could start it off, just give us a loud salawat, and then we'll start the program from here.
Okay.
This one's for you, and then those two share.
I'll give that to you, and I'll hold on to this. So we have two mics, we're kind of sharing. So, Assalamu alaikum, everyone. This is like a super exciting program for me. And for, I think, all of you. Attendance kind of shows that, so that's really good. Thanks to the organizers for making this happen, which is fantastic. I know there's a lot of people watching online. I just want to start by kind of motivating this Islamically, so people understand that this is something deeply Islamic, but we may not have understood religion in this context, because we look at one slice. Guys? Hi. Hi. Okay, so we can look at it in this context. I'm usually really I can talk through an army, but in the interest of our panelists and everyone else, I'm going to request if the parents can watch over their kids, please, so that we don't lose the focus of the conversation. Number one. Islamically motivating this. Is there any precedent in the Quran for this or not? Economic development, number one. Number two, does anything in the prophetic traditions teach us about Islam and economics or not? Number three, what do we learn from the lives of the AhlulBayt? And number four, what do we learn from the lives of the scholars of AhlulBayt that can help teach us some valuable lessons in life? And then we'll, inshallah, open it up to our panel as well as to the audience to have some questions. Please do think about questions that you have, because we're going to open it to you guys so we can actually have a robust discussion, inshallah. So the first thing is, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the Quran, He tells us in various places, وَمَا مِن دَابَّةٍ, for example, وَمَا مِن دَابَّةٍ فِي الْأَرْضِ إِلَّا عَلَى اللَّهِ رِزْقُهَا. That everything, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, there's not anything in the creation except that Allah has ordained its sustenance, its rizq. And so it's important for us to keep those things in mind, number one. Number two, with respect to this, there's prophets that are mentioned. For example, Dawood. And you'll find in the combination of the traditions and the hadith that Dawood and Sulaiman were two kings, right? They were prophets but also kings. And so Dawood was actually living off the public treasury. He was living off the money of the kingdom. And so Allah says to David, that Dawood, I love the one who works for their income. And so he began to get worried and cry actually and ask Allah, what do I do? To the point that eventually Allah, after 40 days, taught him how to mold iron. Allah taught this to Dawood. This is what we recite, for example, Ya Mulayyin al-Hadida li Dawood. That's where it comes from. So it's important to keep this in mind. Allah loves the one who works for their livelihood. Allah does not like that people just get out of Nowhere necessarily. So that's second principle. Third principle, and that's, by the way, also why lotteries and gambling has technically been haram, not only in Islam, but also in Judaism and many other religions, because it's been considered as something that's not economically productive necessarily, or you're getting income without being economically productive. We can have a longer discussion about that another time. So the next thing is Rasulullah. The Holy Prophet himself was a tradesman, he was a salesman, who used to go on caravans from Yemen all the way up to Syria, Sham. And the way he did business, people said that he came back with more income and profit than anyone else, but at the same time, he was deeply honest, trustworthy, and authentic to the point that people wanted to do business with him. In fact, Benedict Kohler, in his book, Early Islam and the Birth of Capitalism, argues that the Prophet was the first capitalist. Now, we wouldn't usually perhaps use this frame of capitalist or socialist, because Islam had elements of both inherent in it. And you can read Iqtisaduna by Shahid Baqir al-Sadr, and he went at length to explain how Islamic economics intrinsically has elements of capitalism as well as socialism. In terms of capitalism, the question is, can you have private property? And from the Islamic perspective, yes, you can have private property. So it has capitalism within it. But also, it also has the elements of a welfare state, meaning there is a system of making sure that people who aren't able to work have their needs met as well. Example, Imam Ali made sure that that person got a pension who was not able to work, that I mentioned to you. The next element is we have this stigma that wealth is sometimes bad. And I want to flip this on its head. We have a narration that's attributed to Imam Ali alayhi salam that says that if poverty was a person, he would kill him. Why? The idea is poverty leads a person to not actualize their best self. What ends up happening is you end up having to resort to crimes sometimes. Not that all poor people do, but when you don't have your needs met, you may gravitate towards these things. That's why in Islamic law, in our view at least, when someone steals, there are 19 conditions that need to be met before you cut the finger. And not even the finger, the tip of the finger. And one of them is there should not have been any famine. The person should not have been hungry. Their family should not have been hungry. So Islam took those things into consideration. But if you look at Maslow's hierarchy of needs, the basic fundamental layer is you have to have your bare necessities, your bare needs met. Until you don't have your bare needs met, you can't go higher up the pyramid and the ladder. And so this is what this conversation's about. The next thing, AhlulBayt. 25 years, we say Imam Ali alayhi salam's right was taken. But 25 years his right was taken, we think that he was just sitting at home. And that's not true. If you read the narrations, you will find Imam Ali was working tirelessly and developing himself and the people around him economically. The first 6 imams actually were very wealthy. We don't talk about this. But the reality of the matter is there were 7 gardens actually, that were in the estate of the AhlulBayt that they would pass generation after generation. And they would get income from it and they would help people. So the question is, it's not wealth in the sense of what our society may say today, which they conflate wealth and materialism or consumerism. We're not talking about materialism or consumerism in and of itself. Even the people who laid the system of the modern economic system, for example, Adam Smith and others before him, there's some things you need to know. If you read The Wealth of Nations, you will find, 1776, he publishes this, and he says, look, we need luxury goods in society. Why? Because it leads to the niyyah, the intention was really good. The intention was circulation of economics and making sure wealth is distributed in society in a better way. And so the idea was the middle class and the lower income of society make luxury goods, which the wealthy purchase, and it leads to a recirculation of wealth in the society. That was the theory. Fast forward, the dynamics have shifted. That the wealthiest people in society create luxury products which the poor and middle class purchase, and they purchase on credit, and often that leads the wealthy to get wealthier and the poor to get poorer. But that's us in terms of not being consciously aware of the system. You can read The Fable of the Bees before Adam Smith. That was a very insightful works about you have a choice as a society, and there's economic choices there. Now come to the scholars. Believe it or not, 150 years ago, there was not a stipend system for Hawza students. The person who introduced the Hawza stipend system was Sheikh Murtaza al-Ansari. Before that, the concept was that you actually had to work for your income. So many people worked as locksmiths. They had different jobs in order to make ends meet, and then they would study. Sheikh Murtaza had a different view. He said, look, med students don't work in the day and then go to med school at night, for example. It doesn't work like that. This is something that our law students don't do the same, which is a closer analogy. And so he came up with this system, which also has its benefits. But what I'm saying is, what did the AhlulBayt say? Final thing, and then I'll switch over. Sixth Imam was asked, Imam Asad, that look, the Shia are getting employed. Is this good or bad? What do you say? The Imam says that tell the Shia to do business, it's better for them, because whoever gets employed, and I'm saying this as someone who has been employed, and I'm sure all of you have at some point as well, he says that for the one who gets employed, they limit their income. And isn't it true in our society today, you get capped at some point in time when you're working for somebody at some point in time. And so that's something to keep in mind. Now, it's not haram to work for someone. Example, Musa. Musa worked for Shoaib, that's in the Quran. Imam Ali even, by the way, we say Imam Ali alayhi salam worked for a Jewish man in the fields. That's not exactly true. What happened was Imam Ali had a JV. He had a joint venture with him. It was an independent operation. Because there's a long, I don't want to open Pandora's box, but because people don't understand what JVs are, and the people who are lecturing may not know about economics, they may not have been able to explain that. So they just said he did mazduri in a Yahudi bagh, but that's not exactly true. So the whole idea is Islam highly encouraged that. Sixth Imam said, do that as much as possible, entrepreneurship. So there was one companion of the Imam. Imam had heard, he was a textile merchant, he was a cloth merchant. He was in what we would call the modern day textile industry or fashion industry maybe. And so Imam had heard he had stopped working. He was one of the Shias and he had stopped doing his business. So the Imam summoned him and asked him, why have you stopped doing your business? And he said, is it because you're not physically or mentally able to work anymore? Because that's a legitimate reason. But he said, no. He said, I'm physically and mentally able to work. He said, the reason I'm not working is because I've done pretty well in business and I've accumulated a certain amount of wealth. And I don't have any debts to pay anyone. I don't owe anybody any money, number one. And number two, I think this can last me to the end of my life. So he had essentially retired. And so the Imam told him two important things. He said, number one, as long as you are able to work, keep working. If you don't, he said, the Imam says to him, work for your dependents and never become dependent upon your dependents. Number one. Number two, the Imam said, keep doing business, for business keeps the mind sharp. And you will notice the mind dull when you forsake business. So the Imam is giving you a recipe to how to live longer in life and how to keep your mind sharp, to be in that battlefield of life. First principle. Next principle is risk. There is some things that are in our community that are half-truths. And sometimes a half-truth is worse than a full lie. I'll give you an example. We say the date of death is written. Date of death is written, definitely. But then why is there dua? Why is there sadaqah? We have narrations that say that if Malakul Maut is at your door, you can delay death up to 7 times by giving sadaqah, up to 7 times. So the question is, you may get to Allah and you got 50 years on this planet or 60 years on this planet, and you say, Ya Allah, why did that guy get 100 years? They weren't even Muslim, they weren't. He said, Baba, did I tell you to eat nahari all day? Did I tell you not to go to the gym? Did I tell you not to? I had written a big life for you, but you weren't taking care of this gift that I gave you, which is the body that I gave you. That's your fault. Similarly, Imam Ali alayhi salam says there are 2 forms of sustenance, rizq. One is the one that will find you wherever you are. And there's another that you have to go after it. The same way that I gave you the analogy of life and how much life Allah may have written for you, the same is with rizq. You may say to Allah, Ya Allah, that person was doing X, Y, and Z and they're a billionaire and I only made like a couple 100,000. Why? Allah may say to you, I had written billions for you, but you didn't work in that avenue. You didn't create a faucet that would allow you to get that income in your life. I was totally just. And so these are the important elements that we want to encourage because it's an important vehicle to develop and build up the society, entrepreneurship is. You can employ people, you can encourage other entrepreneurs, and you can actually build up a strong society. I'll give you one last story. I was in the United Kingdom, and then I'm going to transition. And I always talk about development, economic development, social activism, political activism. I was lecturing in the Iraqi community. A brother comes up to me and says, Sayyid, you talked about economic development. I want to share something with you. I said, what is it? He said, I left Iraq during the Ba'athist regime, and I was an engineer in Iraq. And he said that I want you to share this. I want to share this with you because it's exactly aligned with what you were mentioning. So he said, when I had to leave as a refugee from Iraq, I ended up in Germany. That was the first place he ended up. He said, I couldn't get a job as an engineer, so I had to take whatever I had. So he said, I took a job as in a supermarket, in a grocery store. He said, my job was procurement officer. My job was to stack the shelves. And I had to negotiate with the suppliers. He said, I was working really hard at that, and I was doing a really diligent job, and I was negotiating as hard as possible with the suppliers, and I would get the best price so that we'd have the best profit margin at the end of the day. He said, one day, year passed, 2 years passed, and I was flourishing, the business was flourishing, the economy was flourishing, everything was flourishing, and then one day, my boss, the owner of the company, called me into the office and said, I have to let you go, I have to fire you. And he said, okay. I came from overseas, you gave me an opportunity, thank you, I'm super grateful for this opportunity. Just one question. And that question is, I know and you know the economy is good, I know and you know the business is good, I know and you know I'm the best person at this job. And he said, yes, all of them are true. He said, then why? Why are you letting me go? Because it seems you don't need to. He said, yes. The reason is that you are excellent at this job, economy is good, business is good, but there's one thing you didn't understand. And he said, what is that? He said, the one thing you didn't understand is the system. He said, you see, I'm from a particular community, which you can imagine. And he said that all of my suppliers are from my community. And when you negotiate so hard with them, you hurt them. And I can't have you undermining the system. Therefore, I have to let you go. He said, we haven't gotten to, this brother told me, we have not gotten near that point as a community. And then we wonder, why are our centers empty? Why are our communities empty? Why are our imam bargas empty? Because we've never thought of economic development and political development as part of our faith, when in reality, Islam was at the forefront of that. I remind you, Europe went from kingdoms to democracy. The Muslim world started with democracy and went towards kingdoms. And it was a disaster. You want to know what the power of Islam is, just read the true Islam that Rasulullah and Imam Ali alayhi salam established. You understand. And this is try to move that forward. So I'll stop here, and I'll get into our esteemed panelists here who have a lot to offer here, and hopefully you're thinking of questions yourself. So I'm going to start off just a few things about, I'm going to start off with Zuhair, and then I'll transition from there. I wanted to ask if you could kind of share your journey and how you kind of got into the space that you're in. Was it something that you had planned? And what is private equity, right? I think because we want to get everyone on the same page. And we want to help people understand, you know, what are the different avenues and industries in life and society that you may not be aware of. And they may be right under your nose in New York City, right? You have a huge opportunity here in the, cultural and financial center of the world to just go across the way and learn a few things. So I was wondering if you could just share a bit of your journey and tell us a little bit about that, and then we can go from there, please.
Sure. Thank you very much. So, brief background. I grew up, I was born in Tanzania. I grew up here in the New York area. Been to this mosque many times. We actually grew up, we lived in Jackson Heights until I was about 4, and then we moved to New Jersey. And then in 1990, my family moved to Orlando. From there, I went to school in Washington, D.C. at Georgetown. I studied undergraduate business and specifically studied accounting and finance. And to be perfectly honest, my main obsession coming out of school was I needed to make money to pay off my student loans. I will say that over the course of understanding finance and accounting, I pretty much knew I was not going to be an accountant full time, but as I often say, I'm not an accountant, but I play one on Zoom every now and then. I learned about private equity, and what private equity is we make investments in businesses. You've heard, I'm sure, in the news, probably some sensationalized news about what private equity is, and they come in and they fire people and, you know, break apart companies and things along those lines. I would tell you that the reality is somewhat very different. We invest in businesses. We invest in primarily family-owned businesses where there is a need to either create some liquidity for the next generation. There's a need for additional investment to grow those businesses. There's some need for that capital. I learned about that over the course of going to school, and it did appeal to me. My dad owns actually, I would say, on both sides of my family, both mother and father's side, it's, we have business owners, entrepreneurs. And so on the one hand, I knew I wanted to be somewhat involved in business, but on the other hand, I wanted some real practical experience and to operate in a more structured environment and learn from other businesses. So private equity as an avenue is, I get the opportunity to meet people, meet entrepreneurs. I get the opportunity to think about business strategies alongside them. We raise money from outside investors. We invest in the company, and then really is when the work starts, because then you help the company help the company build, and whether that's making an acquisition, helping with expanding their sales force, helping them see what a 3 to 5 year strategy is. Those are the different elements of what we do on a day-to-day basis. Right now, the fund that we have and the firm that we have 3 companies, 2 based in Arizona, 1 based in, oh my God, where's the other one based? Oh, Idaho, excuse me. I try to forget when I go to Idaho. It's a very long travel. But that is my, that's effectively my job. It's engaging, it's exciting, it's different every day. It is long hours. It's sometimes not exactly what my wife would want me to do often, but it is a very interesting area.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for sharing
Sure.
that. And I just, sometimes you just have to ask people and just, what's going on in their life. And I remember Zohair and I, we struck it off very quickly when we met at Sijni, and I just realized that there was such talent there, and sometimes you don't even know that. And so I had interacted with a lot of people in the community, but unfortunately, I wasn't. So just have a conversation with people and you'll be amazed what you'll learn along the way. I understand he's an avid golfer as well, which I'm trying to pick up on. I'm working on as well, so it's a delight. I'm going to ask you actually the same question. What's your journey? What's your story? And how can our audience kind of resonate with that? So I'd love if you could just kind of talk about and then transition the amazing work that you're working on now.
So Assalamu alaikum again. So I grew up in Brooklyn. My parents came from Pakistan. And what's the first thing all immigrants when they come to New York? They work, they work, they work. So I was working with my dad. My dad had the first halal Punjab grocery store in Brooklyn. But because of the trust my dad had, we built multiple businesses. I opened up a 99-cent store, construction company, a restaurant, real estate investment. So I was doing all that. I had 5 businesses, and I was living the American dream. I had a big paycheck. I already had so much money coming in. But 9/11 happened. So when 9/11 happened, that changed everything. Even my neighbors thought, because I'm a Muslim, I'm the enemy. So now, all of a sudden, I had to wear a different hat. I had to argue with FBI agents, Homeland Security, Secret Service agents, police department, and to save our people. Save the people who were being arrested just because their name is Ahmed Ali, Muhammad Khan. It didn't make a difference. So I started this office, which was only volunteers, and this is where I'm trying to get at. Volunteer half the size of this room, all volunteer-based. I had zero money, and all I was doing was just spending my volunteer time there, collecting resources from board members who were part of it, especially my dad, to help pay for the bills. At this moment, 22 years later, I've raised over $35 million. $35 million for that office. I have over 100 volunteers and workers in my office. It's bigger, as big as almost Al-Khoei Center, my office space, almost. It's 20,000 square foot space. The reason why I'm telling you this, now I also sit on the board, as the Imam was mentioning, being politically active. I sit with the mayor. You guys seen the mayor that came here. In the back end, I'm in the back end, always making those phone calls that you should have the mayor come in here. I don't know if you guys remember the first time Bloomberg came in here. I was the guy who set that up. And we need to have that political power. Yesterday, 2 days ago, Monday, today's Tuesday, right? No, today's Wednesday. Monday, I sponsored Governor's Iftar in Albany, being politically active. And I'm telling you, I'm sitting on these boards, over 30% of $30 billion that's being invested or being invested in New York City has to go to contracts which are to minorities, and we're one of them. I'm being very clear, over $30 billion, 30%. I mean, whatever business you do, IT, construction, you do healthcare, anything that you guys do. I've been it, I'm doing it, I'm just sitting in it, and I cannot explain to you every time when I see an organization like ICON, do the programs, get involved in the city, and I will help you guys, you know? Other programs, I mean, even with, and I'll be very clear, with Al-Khoei, I mentioned about pre-K when it was coming out. I said, you have to do it. Razi School, same thing. I said, you have to do these programs. And this is how you get into the system. I mean, you are young guys, trust me, you can do it. If I could do it, you definitely could do it. I actually had to go back to school while I was running the office to finish my degree. And that's the way to do it. You just gotta work hard at it. I'm telling you, it's possible, and I would not be sitting here. I mean, I just bought a building, $2.6 million, about 8 months ago. And I'm buying another one in 12 months, $6.6 million, $6.5 million. I'm purchasing that building, 3 buildings more. But this is what I'm saying, it is possible. We pay taxes here. Our, Imam and our brother right here, he can definitely tell how much taxes we pay, and we have to utilize it the right way. We have to try to get that back for our system, back
Yes.
for our community.
Yesterday was a bad day.
The other thing, what I want to mention, the work that I'm doing now, some of the Al-Khoei students that are here, they've been to the FBI Youth Career Day. That's happening in May 20th again. So now we have over 2,500 police officers, over 300 FBI agents who are Muslim, over, I would say, at least 2,000 TSA and Homeland Security agents. When you come to the airport, see his name is Muhammad or his name is Khan, you'll see his badge. I'm telling you, that's happening, and it is great that our community is getting involved. Next, May 10th, now the biggest thing is this, in May 10th, I'm actually training new FBI agents on Islam. And I'll repeat it again, new FBI agents on Islam. And that's an important thing for our community to be involved, to let them understand, just because I have a beard doesn't make me a terrorist. Just because, I have a tasbih in hand, or I'm running to the, mosque, that doesn't mean I'm a fanatic or anything. I'm going, it's Ramzan, it's Eid, this is my religion. But that's what I want you guys to understand. There are so many possibilities right now. So many of our community members are in these high-level positions, and I hope you guys think about this. And yeah, entrepreneur is where it is at.
Thank you so much for that. Brother Rizvi and I met at the Jalous, and we just hit it off right away, and it was just amazing. Like, the passion that he has for community development is really, it's infectious, so I really appreciate that. And the 9/11 point, I think that's very pertinent, and a lot of people can resonate. I know my dad himself has a very Muslim name, and he was actually head of catering for airline divisions. But after 9/11, the whole game had changed, and he had to suffer, and many other people did as well. So I really appreciate the work that you're doing on that front. Switching to this, to trying to give coming to the essence of what we're here to talk about is, and I think it was beautifully highlighted about thinking bigger. The first step is kind of thinking that these things are possible, right? As it said, Henry Ford says, whether you think you can or you can't, you're right. And first is the thought process about, do you think this is feasible or not? Do you think that you can? So I'm going to switch it over to Zuhair here, about if you could kind of give us, from the investor standpoint, a little bit of an insight into where is the world going in the industries. We talked about this a little bit last night, that you have to anticipate where the world is going. You could have been studying computer science your whole life, and then ChatGPT comes overnight, and then the dynamic shift, for example. And so you want to be anticipating where is the world going. And I was wondering if you could give some insights on what you're hearing, because investors often get a lot of pitches from people, and so they have a little bit of a trajectory there. And also, how can people start thinking about ideas if they have a business, where to get ideas, how to stress test their ideas, and kind of come up with a framework so they're not shooting in the dark, but they actually have some structure around that. So I was wondering if you could shed some light on that.
Thank you. That's a big question. Yeah, thank you. Please do not invest based on any advice that I'm going to give you. I would feel very bad. No, so I can tell you the approach that that we take at the firm. And at the firm, what we talk about is industries that are in growth mode that we believe have a tailwind. I will give you, I'll give you an example. I've been spending a lot of time looking at engineering businesses, right? Engineering services, engineering firms. If you look around and you think about, you think about law firms, you think about accounting firms. These are professional service firms that have critical needs in society and in business at large. But accountants are paid, accountants are paid at sort of X. Lawyers are paid at maybe 2 or 3X, and engineers are actually down here. What I've often heard from engineers is, listen, you're never going to be poor, but you're never going to get rich if you're an engineer. Well, that industry has turned on its head, right? And it's happening right now as we speak. We're in the process of trying to buy an engineering service firm in Tennessee. The premise is a couple-fold. In order for any construction to happen, in order for any building to happen, you need engineers, okay? You need them to sign off at the beginning on the plans. In some cases, you need them to sign off and help you get permitting as you're moving along, and then you need engineers at the end in order to sign off on the project. Engineers are a scarce resource and have been for many, many years. And I'm talking about civil engineers, I'm talking about mechanical engineers, not necessarily, everybody went into computer science, right? Everybody went into different areas, but there was something that was missing and overlooked, which is the power that these engineering firms have, and even more important, pricing power, because if you have a scarce resource, simple economics will tell you that you have the ability to charge for it. So that's the law of supply and demand. So I don't know really when this started, but over the course of the past, call it 5 to 10 years, some of these engineering firms and entrepreneurial engineers, which sometimes is a little bit of a contradiction. Engineers are very precise and measured in their approach. And by the way, since they're building all of this stuff, thank God they are. But some basically started to combine their businesses. They combined their businesses and they were able to get bigger projects. They were able to spread the projects amongst more people. The more people that they were able to spread the projects amongst, they provided sort of the junior engineers more opportunity and the ability to work on different types of projects that they could then lead. So as a result of what we call consolidation. There was smaller engineering firms were joining with others. They were becoming larger, and they're really making a big, really having a big impact. The engineering services industry is $110 billion in the United States. Okay, it is growing at 5 to 7% per year. That is primarily driven by wage increases. Okay, there is further acceleration in engineering services because of what's happening with, you guys have read about the infrastructure bill and the infrastructure needs in this country. That is, it's $500 billion over the course of, the next, call it 10 to 15 years. But that underlying, infrastructure, and that's really government funding and government support, in conjunction with what, the needs and the natural escalation that is happening because of, because of the scarce resource and, of engineers, and they're able to charge more. This is creating really a growth acceleration in that industry. So what people may have thought of as a very sleepy, not too highly paid, it's a little bit boring, these people are becoming very exciting. And if there are any engineers, out there, please, please talk to me. I know you were, and it's one of the reasons that I wanted to give you this example. And I wanted to follow up on Brother's point here. I have looked at, my team and I've looked at about 100 firms over in the U.S. With the intention of trying to buy one. Haven't found the right one yet. But we have found some smaller engineering firms that we think are going to be, what we call add-on acquisitions. So you buy a larger company, we call that a platform, and then you acquire others and build the business. That's one way to both build the business, build scale, and also get more people. A key area that we look at is these minority contracts, right? The amount of opportunity that exists for, minority-backed, minority-funded, minority-capitalized, minority-led, and yes, we count as a minority. Women count as a minority, right? The amount of support that exists, for these programs and the ability to win these contracts, it's tremendous. There's no question about it, and the fact of the matter is that from an education, certainly from an education perspective, our community is considered and our minority is considered fairly educated and quite, in business, quite mainstream. So there's no need to be, afraid. We can work for the city. We can work for the New York Department of Transportation. We can, do these contracts. We can build up a business that is almost community-based, that is focused on providing engineering services, that is minority-owned. That opportunity exists, and that is not going away anytime soon over the next 10 years. Is that helpful?
That's very good.
Didn't want to be.
No, that's beautiful. In the interest of the time, because I had previewed the audience a little bit before, so I'm going to try to go a little bit more into rapid fire mode, so maybe we can keep it to 2 minutes, because that's there's a lot more to get to, and my job is to not give loaded questions. So that's my promise to you. I'll keep them light, but maybe we can address some of these things. These things are really important because, and I'm trying to lay this for the next sessions and workshops, there's 4 areas we need to work on as a community. Economics, or finance, is number 1. Academia, very important. Number 3 is media, and number 4 is politics. And it's not one after the other. These are simultaneous. You first need to understand in politics there's 3 M's: money, membership, and mission. And it's usually in that order. And so it's very important to make sure that you have a strong economic foundation as an organization, so then that endows universities and academia, as well as politics, as well as media. I say this because when the '79 revolution happened, Dr. John Esposito at your alma mater at Georgetown University, He said that I had no job. He was a professor of Islam in America. Nobody cared. And he was sending book contracts left, right, and center. He said the revolution in 79 happened, and he said all of a sudden everyone came to me and said, hey, we need to publish books, we need to find out, because politicians go to the academia branch to inform the legislative branch of the United States. So they ask them, hey, what are the views about this school? So that's very important. Media, of course, perceptions are very, very important. And politics and economics are not disconnected. My PhD was actually in innovation, and leadership in innovation. And the question was, well, a lot of innovation, as Zuhair pointed out, comes from the government sector, and they're incubating of it. For example, the internet. The internet, in its rudimentary form, was already there in the 1960s. It was only released to the public much, much later. So a lot of these things come out of defense and the defense sector, and their budgets are sometimes public, and sometimes they're shadow budgets that you never find out about. But innovation is coming through and through from there. So it's very important to understand these things. So switching over to the rapid fire approach, I think there's so many lessons that from Brother Muhammad's view that we can kind of share. But one I think is the immigrant experience that you kind of touched on earlier, and being someone who came from that, how did you conquer the fear that may be with entrepreneurship that sometimes people have, that's a perceived fear or a real fear in a lot of people's minds? How did you get the kind of the gall and the audacity to do that, besides being a New Yorker, in some sense?
Well, so before I go there, I actually want to add to Brother Zuhair, who mentioned about the minority-owned businesses and the contracts, and especially an engineer. So I sit on the board for the mayor's office for minority women and minority women-owned businesses. And at those meetings, and I kid you not, I see a lot of Latinos, African Americans. I see one Desi who's not Muslim, and that's it. I'm saying that specifically because I want to see more engineers having those contracts. And it's not just about building the buildings, it's also inspections. I kid you not, I'm talking about in millions of dollars. These are contracts from the city to the engineer firm will be hired by the city for $10 million for a 3-year contract just to go inspect one of the bridges, once a month. These are the types of jobs that they have. These are the type of consultant jobs. Real great jobs. I'm telling you, it's really good. However, moving forward, because of my dad, he's the one who actually I rely upon. He was the one who actually took that first step to open, and I'm going to do a thesis on this. Listen to this. The first ethnic stores in these ethnic places are the social service agency provider. What do I mean by that? My dad's grocery store was where everyone went to because they said, oh, you've succeeded in the American dream, you have your own store. How do I get my kid to the school? I need to find a job. I didn't get a paycheck yet. Can I take out some food? So my dad has a book, still today, a book which is credit and debit for people who actually did not get their paychecks on time, even during Ramadan. And that's actually what gave us more and more encouragement. And we didn't have credit, we didn't have equity, so what we did, we actually had a committee. And I'm sure everybody has a committee. You put your committee in, 10 friends, and at the end of the year, or one takes a turn, but that's how I opened up the businesses. Committee for $200,000. Cash. I'll say it again, cash. So every year, $200,000, that's how I opened up the businesses. That's how it happened. Not that you can't do it, absolutely. But you guys are more educated than me. You will be more educated than us. You should take it to the next level. You know what I mean? If somebody showed me the way, like I'm showing the kids the way right now with these events that I'm doing, meeting with the governor, meeting with the mayor, and these are things you need to do. Like sitting on the board of the mayor's office for minority women-owned businesses is a huge thing. Someone contacts me, I'm telling you to get that credibility so then you can bid for those jobs. And it's not about construction only. I'm telling you, it's not about construction. It's about buying paper products. It's about buying printing paper. It's about buying pens, buying water, everything the city bids out.
Beautifully said. And I think this is a very important point to highlight. You can do conscious capitalism as well, that capitalism that's for the better good. I'll give you one example. There's a brother named Safwan Shah. He's from Pakistan. He has a startup called Pay Active. I mean, he's done several startups. They've been pretty successful, but this is his new one. And Walmart and many other companies are on board. What was the motivation behind this? He said the Bible says that pay the wage of the employee before the sun sets, for they are poor and they are deserving. The prophet said, pay the wage of the laborer before their sweat dries. So he said, why is it that we pay people on 2-week cycles in America and in the world? And he asked this question, he didn't find a good answer. So he said, we need to give people earned wage access. Like nowhere else in society, he says, can you get a 2-week free loan from your employee and not pay interest on it? And yet that's happening. And then on top of that, we pay about 30 billion or more in the lowest income members of American society pay in payday loans, auto lien loans, some of the most detrimental loans they're paying because they can't make ends meet the same way Brother Muhammad was mentioning. And so you can actually do good and be good by having a compass that's right and also be profitable along the way. So don't rule that out. So thank you for sharing that. Zuhair, I'm going to ask you, what do you just pointed, what do you look for when you're about to invest in a company or prior to investing? So I think that's a question. We have a lot of people who may be interested in coming in front of you as a shark or and they would like to know what's going on in your mind before making a yes or no decision in investing.
I think it comes down to and there are many factors, but I mean the three general ones is what is the company performance. Now this is not about a new idea, right? This is not about a business plan. That's not my thing. There are many more qualified people than me to think about a business plan. I still have to look at numbers and count cash in order to value a business. But I do think it comes down to three things, which is what is the business proposition, either for a new business. What is the fundamental? Can you state what you're trying to do literally in 3 sentences that you can give people? What am I trying to do? I'm trying to build an engineering service business that will be focused on infrastructure in the southeastern United States. That's what I'm doing, right? Everything is about that strategy. So what is the business proposition in its simplest form? Number 2 then becomes, okay, well, what are the industry dynamics of that industry? What is happening in that industry? Who are the big players? Are there a lot of big companies and that you're competing with? Are there a lot of smaller companies? Do you have a different approach? But what is happening in the industry, and what is that outlook in the industry over the next period of time? And then third, it comes down to people. Is who is the team that you're backing, right? So and I use the word team very, very specifically. If there was a piece of advice that I would, provide for people, and especially people that are, that want to start businesses and be entrepreneurs, what I would say, one of the things that I would say is seek help, right? Get partners. The amount of businesses, the success rate of businesses with multiple partners versus as sole proprietors, the success odds are tremendous. In favor of partners. Two minds are better than one. There is a multiplier effect there. So what I would say is the third thing is the people. Who are the people? What have they done? Do they have the passion to continue to drive and move forward and take this idea to the next stage?
Very, very well stated. I really appreciate that. Ramon, I want to switch, and I'm going to come back to Zuhair on this as well. One of the aspects of being an entrepreneur is leadership and people skills. And if you look at all the prophets, I was saying the other day, they were all shepherds in some form, and that you're having to lead these crowds and herds in a way that they may not understand the wisdom right now. But eventually, there's some who get it, and then they move along the way. So I was wondering if you could kind of share your dynamics of being a leader in an organization, as well as getting buy-in and getting contracts with the government, working with people who may not all see eye to eye, and actually steering the ship forward. Any ideas and thoughts on that, please?
So be humble. That's the first thing. I'm sure you guys heard of who's the best media for Muslims. Does anybody know? or who's the worst, I should say. I'm just being ironic. Do you know who's the worst media for Muslims? Fox News. You know that, right? The Fox whole empire. Who runs Fox News? Rupert Murdoch. Rupert Murdoch, what's the name of the company? It's called News Corp. If some of you have been at the events that I've been holding with the FBI and Homeland Security, I actually got Roger Ailes, when he was alive, to fund that program. And they still fund it till today. So sitting at the table, being humble with Roger Ailes, explaining to him how it affected our community, Muslim community, because he had every other person on the news who was talking bad about Muslims. And I said that caused such a backlash to our young kids that they got beaten up. And I said, you should pay for this program. $25,000 check every year. So I'm telling you, be humble, be straightforward, be truthful, and always have data. I have so much data, and that's the key. Every year we collect data. I service almost 30,000 people in my office. 30,000. During COVID, for the 2-3 years that was COVID, well, some people say it's over, it's still not over. We gave out food, 28 million pounds of food. The lines were around the block. And guess what? I'm right next to a masjid. And every person who was on that line was not all Muslim. I'm the largest halal food pantry in Brooklyn, but everyone who's on the line is not Muslim, but they're looking up. Oh, we're getting food from near a mosque. These guys are Muslims. They're not bad. It didn't make a difference to me who came on the line. I have Chinese people, Russian people, I have Jewish people, I have Catholics, I have black people, I have Haitian people. Every other person comes on that line. What I'm saying to you is that's the way it changes. Now, if you guys follow us on Instagram or Facebook, yes, I'm giving a plug-in right here. You have to see the line, you have to see the amount of people we're serving, and all the political activity that we're doing. So we started, and this is where I'm coming back to the politics, the first iftar that ever was held in Brooklyn Borough Hall with Marty Markowitz in 2006. After 9/11, it took like 4 or 5 years to get any elected official to say, let's have an iftar together with us, because everybody was afraid. But after that, I did it in the 5 boroughs, and then Michael Bloomberg, who was the mayor at that time. We did it with all the community members, and it made a change. But that's what I'm saying. You have to take that step. And then I got the city to start funding us. It took time, but that's how it happened.
Thank you so much for sharing that. To this point about adding value to society, same book, Religion and Immigration by Dr. John Esposito at Georgetown. There's a chapter, it was edited by him. He said, how did the Jewish community change the narrative of discrimination? And one of the ways they did it was they funded hospitals. At that time they were called hospitals, today they're called clinics. They would be clinics, just a bed or two and a doctor or two. And they would give treatment to people, because people were very discriminatory towards them when they came. And what changed the narrative was, at that time, either if you could afford a doctor, they would come to your house, and if you couldn't afford a doctor, you went to a Jewish hospital. And the Irish and many other people were sending their kids there, and so it changed the narrative, and they said, hold on, we are being racially or discriminatory towards these people and using slurs, but when our kids get sick, they go to the Jewish hospitals, so it changed the narrative. Similarly, we should have clinics. We have like Al-Hadi in Minnesota and many other places, and I'm sure we have them here as well, but this is something that people say, hey, these aren't people that I see on the media. These are people who are on the ground in the trenches with us, helping and looking after us, so it changes the narrative. So mental health is another big one, right? Today we know that the first mental health hospitals in record, the whole history of mental health is changing. We now know they were actually in the Muslim world. But nobody knew that until recently. And so maybe we should revive that. If you go to Chicago, they have the Khalil Center, for example, where they give people mental health treatment regardless. But we as far as AhlulBayt should be trailblazing on this. I'm going to just ask one more question, then open it up to the audience for some questions. And that is, particularly for Brother Zohair, you're part of YPO. And I wanted to know if you could mention a little bit about what that is and how you've also been a CEO. And how, if you could compare and contrast the role of CEO versus investor, and what are the things that come to mind that are common, and what are things that maybe different between. I said I wouldn't ask a loaded question, but I did. but just do that in whatever capacity you're willing to, and then we'll ask people their questions, and we can get to that, inshallah.
So if you use the statistics as a guide, I was a CEO for 2.5 years, and I've been a private equity investor for 25. And I went back to private equity, so that should say something about how I have helped. No, I became a CEO of a company as part of as part of an investment. It was a retail business. We imported things from India. It was fun. I will tell you that. As a CEO, you may not think that you answer to people, but I had a board to answer to, and frankly, I had employees to answer to, because it just doesn't, it doesn't go that way. Their success is the company's success, which then is my success. So I always took that approach, and frankly, that approach is not, I don't think is any different as an investor. My success is the management team's success, is reflected only by what help I can give the management team to make their business a success, and therefore it impacts the investment. So I have, it's to me, the notion has always been, I can't do everything on my own. I've never been able to, and frankly, I don't want to. So how do I bring the right team of people in place, either as a CEO or as an investor, and move this forward, but really make sure that they are sharing in the success, or even frankly the success is on them, because ultimately, I measure success in different different metrics.
Very, very good. And I think we'll need a part 2 for YPO and other things, because YPO is a network of successful CEOs who solve problems together. And this is what's really important. You'll want a network of people that you can bounce ideas off of to solve problems. And I think YPO is a really good example of that. This culture in Silicon Valley was actually inculcated, they say, by Andy Grove, at Intel, who was the mentor for Steve Jobs and others. Everywhere else you want advice in the world, typically, historically, you'd have to pay somebody a check to get advice, valuable advice. But he said, no, I'm going to help people out regardless. I'm sure you could go find other historical examples, but that culture still permeates there. But we have a huge network here that we should optimize for. Okay, so I'll stop that here, or pause that on ice, and open it up to any questions that we have from the floor, and we can get some thoughts from our esteemed panelists. Yes, Mikan. Yeah.
So, a couple of different areas. I mean, the
question was, how does he find companies to invest in, just to get everyone on the same page?
For what we're doing, and it's specific. It's services businesses, and it's somewhere between $5 and $20 million of earnings. There are intermediaries, right, in the world. So you've heard of investment banks, Morgan Stanley, Goldman Sachs, et cetera. Investment banks will work with companies in a number of different areas, and they, if they need investment, they bring you those ideas. That's one way. Reading about, what industries are interesting, and then, seeing how maybe, okay, if I see that there is a very large and successful engineering service business, as I said, that was making acquisitions. Okay, well, I'm not afraid to. That's a great idea. Maybe I can find a smaller business and, make an investment there. So reading about what's going on is the other way to get ideas. I mean, it happens at a variety of times. Sometimes sometimes in the shower, right? Sometimes at 2 a.m. But that's really, the question is, put yourself in the situation where those thoughts are being provoked, right? Whether, okay, I'm reading something, it's provoking thought. Even watching Shark Tank, for me, it provokes that thought and exercises those muscles.
Very well stated. Thank you. Thank you. Any other questions? Yes, sister. So I'll take a stab at this. So I've actually been in a startup, and the way this happened was I moved to London and did a startup, because I was telling people to do entrepreneurship, but I wasn't doing it myself. So I needed to, put my money where my mouth was, or my feet where my mouth. So the fear aspect, there's two ways. One, you can naturally have this tendency of just being fearless. The other is when fire is there, and your fear is coming on, you just dive headfirst into it. And eventually, what happens is you get so used to it that it becomes second nature. I'll give you an example. Public speaking, I mentioned this last night, it was a process for me. When I first started, it was really bad, believe me. Not for me, but for the audience. God, may Allah have mercy on them, right? Like, it was really tough. And so you're like, and believe me, I've bombarded and failed so many times. But I often mention the statistics in entrepreneurship about this idea that most entrepreneurs in America, they succeed on their third and fourth venture. But you can't bypass the first two failures, because those are very valuable learning opportunities. So there's no such thing as failure. But to solve that fear at a practical level, what you can do is start earlier. So if you're in mom and dad's house and you fail, it's not a big deal. Start your lemonade stand at 12 or 13 and keep iterating at a young age so you're not afraid. So by the time you do your third or fourth venture, you're already 17, 18, 19. So then there's no fear. The fear often happens in our communities, I come from the same background, is, why don't you, you're 29, 30, you're just getting a family, and then you get more and more less likely to take risk as you get older down that line, and you get comfortable. And the companies know they throw you the big packages at that time to keep you very comfortable. So I would say is the biggest thing that I really recommend about entrepreneurship is, and I don't know how our panelists feel about this, but for me, it pushes your growth as a human being. And to be a good entrepreneur, your growth as a human being is proportional to the growth of the company. So I was reading about, coming from an engineering background, I was on the subway, or the tube they call it in London, reading about marketing in the morning, having no marketing background, and implementing an hour later. Or doing sales. I found out I was actually really good at sales. I didn't realize that. And I would have never done that in a traditional job because I would have been doing my normal thing. And so one of my mentors actually told me this before I did the startup. He was like, "You're the best salesman I ever met in my life." I was like, "What?" He's like, "Yeah, but you're just selling the AhlulBayt and the Quran to people." And I was like, "What?" He's actually a very, very successful entrepreneur. He's done extremely well for himself and in the telecom industry. What I'm thinking is we don't realize the skills that we have sometimes. We pigeonhole ourselves. So the biggest fear that you should have is of not living an adequate life, of not living the best life that you can live. And that's a much bigger price to pay, the pain of regret, that I could have been something, and on your deathbed you're like, "Oh, I just played it safe." Read Robert Frost in The Woods, right? The two paths in the wood. I chose the one that most don't, and that's made all the difference. Choose the difficult path. It will be more fulfilling. And you can crunch the numbers like these two before you do that, though.
So there's another thing, especially for New Yorkers and small business loans from the city. I mean, if you're a minority women-owned business, they will help you. And the important thing that I've learned, all the businesses that I had started, I actually gave all my businesses to my brothers to run, by the way. It wasn't that they closed down. My brothers are running those businesses now. So when I wanted to start a new business, or when I was thinking of a new business, I actually asked the people who were already my customers, What do you think this neighborhood needs? Oh, it needs an Islamic bookstore. All right, so we'll put some Islamic books, and we started with that. But that's what I would do. I would try to actually, if you're thinking of a business, I'm just saying it out loud. If you're thinking of a particular type of business, volunteer there, intern there, just to get to know it. Many people come to me, to my nonprofit, to see they want to be working in a nonprofit. They want to run and they want to be a CEO of a nonprofit. I said, come here, get on the line. Talk to the people. See how difficult it is to handle a food pantry line when the people cutting in front of each other and then start to scream. And forget about with Ukraine and Russians that were on my line. Oh my God, I had so many issues. But literally, yeah, we had to calm them down. But that's what you do. Whatever business, and there's money there. There is money. There's so much money for women who actually want to be in engineering and all this other businesses. Oh my God, the city, I know there's also colleges that will fund you completely. It's a free ride for women.
Do you want to add to that? Let's take another question, yeah. Or
you're a nonprofit, so how do you, you basically give back to the community, but how does
So let's take a couple of questions at the same time so we can make sure we don't miss people. Anyone else had a question? And then we'll pass to Brother Mohammed. Yes, please. Construction.
All right. So the thing is, I was able to marry because I'm the eldest, first of all. And you know, the oldest brother has to do everything. I am not kidding you. I've cut meat. I've mopped the floor. I've put in sheetrock. I've put in drop ceilings, I had to do everything and then teach my brothers. And they did good. You know, that's the thing. I was fortunate enough to have a team with me. I have 4 other brothers, the 5 of us, you know, working together. But sometimes it's not easy, you know, because if you're by yourself or you only have 1 other brother or a sister or so forth, and sometimes, you know, you don't get along, and that's normal. But that's the thing. I mean, I was very fortunate enough to do that. And yes, and this is the key, because I was running 5 different businesses, that's why I was able to run this nonprofit. I was not dependent on income from this nonprofit. For 2 years I volunteered. I had residual income coming in from the other businesses. So I was very fortunate. But that's what took one step. Okay, you know what? I got to get, and when I went back to college, you're not going to believe it. So I went back to college to get a business degree. My dean calls me over, says, what are you here for? I see you on the news all the time. And at that time, I was on the news all the time. He was talking about media. I can't even explain to you how I use the media. If you punch up Muhammad Rizvi, it just lights up. But anyhow, what I'm saying to you is that when I went back to college, the dean told me, get out of business, get into politics. So I switched my major to politics. That's how I started understanding I have to learn about politics, grant writing. That's the key. I write grants. 5 years I had to give a report card to the city, coming from resources from my own pocket, raising funds for 5 years. And then the city says, okay, now you could write a grant. So then I started writing grants. I write about 100 grants in paper every year, and maybe 8 of them I'll get accepted. So that's 8%. But those 8% could be a $4 million grant, $3 million grant, $2 million, and that's how I run my office. And then PayPal. I can't even tell you about PayPal. So we're on PayPal finally, and when I did for Thanksgiving, I did 1,000 turkeys. 1,000 turkeys, about 1,000 halal chickens for Thanksgiving. I received through PayPal $100,000. And some of the big companies like the ones that you represent, hedge funds, wouldn't believe. I was just sitting there at PayPal, I said $10,000. Like, oh my God, I'm trying to find this hedge fund right now. I want to thank him. But you know, that's what happens. But that's how I'm running it. And I would love to show whoever wants to try to do it. Believe me, there's a lot of work. There's a lot of work. I can't handle all those 30,000 people. There's more people here in Queens. I can't do it all.
Absolutely. Any other questions? So I'm going to probably close out here. Okay. Did you have one?
Yeah.
Sure.
Sure, of course. Yeah, you know, I'm not here to necessarily tell you that you should start a private equity firm. I mean, I think it is. I frankly, yes, now I'm a partner, but I was an employee for 22 years, right? I mean, it took a long, it took a long time, and even now, I mean, we raise money, we invest. A good chunk of it is our own, but we raise money and then we invest people's money. So I came in through an industry that was growing and building during that time. When I got into private equity in 1991, it was not the industry that it is today. The industry of private equity. Well, I mean, again, 1991, nobody knew what it was, right? Or I should say 95. Nobody knew what it was. There were very few people. Now you've heard of people like Blackstone, and you've heard of people like, Warren Buffett, one of the original private equity guys. Although he does it in a different form. So I was lucky that I ended up getting in at the beginning stages of an industry that was growing and continued to grow. So that was just, luck purely. What I am saying, though, to that example is try to position yourself in an industry that has that tailwind, that has that, opportunity, that you see that happening over the course of the next, period of time. And, don't be afraid to think bigger. I noticed that there was a brother, that I know that had mentioned that he was an engineer. And we talk about partnership and seeking out a team and seeking out people. One engineer is an employee. Two engineers is a firm, right? If you think about it, there's power in that, and that's really, that's really what it takes. In terms of, we talked about investment and where you can find capital, where you can find money. That's a different question, and resources. And I don't think we necessarily have time to go through, but whether it's small business loans, whether it's Circle Up, GoFundMe, there are so many more opportunities, for people that are looking for investments to make, large size, small size. It exists much more now than it does before, but I think what it does take is the three things that I mentioned before. What's your business proposition, and can you state it clearly, right? What is the industry that you're investing in, and where is it going, right? I'm not gonna be able to raise money for a typewriter business now, right? Sure. I mean, it's not gonna happen. And then, what's the team? Because even when I've made startup investments on my own. I'm not very good at it, but I've made them. But it's never about a person. It is always about the team. What is the team? Because one person can't do it alone. Steve Jobs did not create Apple without Wozniak, right? And that there are countless examples of that over time in business.
So final thing that I'll conclude it, I realize 11, I know we'll need a part 2 and 3 for this eventually in the future, is best life advice you ever got. So I'll start out with Brother Muhammad Rizvi, if you could share with me.
Look, the best advice I can give you is, because of my dad, who was helping others, that's the only reason I'm able to help others, because that was enlisted in me. And I think that's one of the most important things. As we're doing that, it's uplifting the Muslim community. And when I say that, what I was talking about, all the food that I had given out in the food pantry, I actually was driving my food pantry trailer to churches. And those churches, remember till today, it was a halal food pantry trailer that came to us to give us food for our people. That's a key, and that's a change.
Beautifully stated, yes. Same question to you, Zahir.
Yeah. The power of positivity is very important, right? And I think about it when I hire. Someone told me once, hire happy people, right? The power of positive thinking is it's very important. And I mean, by the way, sometimes as an entrepreneur, sometimes it really almost has to be in the face of a lot of issues, a lot of conflict, But, and I, to bring it back to Islam a little bit, there's some element of that that is faith. It's gonna happen. Manifest it, have faith, whatever. There are many, The Secret, all of these lessons, but what are they telling you? If you believe that something can happen, it can happen in some form or fashion. It may not be the same path, but it can happen. And, that is, thinking along those lines to me is, probably the best advice that I got.
Beautiful, beautiful. So I'll just conclude with my two thoughts on that. We need a reading list from all of you after this, but Learned Optimism by Dr. Martin Seligman at UPenn. It's a learnable trait. You should learn optimism. Optimistic people are happier, healthier, wealthier. They're better on every metric than people who are more pessimistic. And the other element is, the best advice I ever got was growth mindset. That is add the word yet to your vocabulary. Carol Dweck at Stanford. If you see everything as a journey, then you'll realize this is just one step in a journey, and it'll change your whole perspective on that. Even fear, it'll conquer fear, because fear is temporary. You cannot imagine how much you can achieve in life if you just realize that if you just conquer your fear for 20 seconds, you have no idea what's on the other side. 20 seconds of courage, that's all you need. And if nothing else, live Karbala as your movement to inspire you and motivate you. Imam Hussein's courage, Hazrat Abbas's courage, the AhlulBayt's courage. If that doesn't give you courage, they went to the battlefield. We're afraid of starting a company? Really? Have we really used Karbala as a practical motivator to change our lives for the better? I think we have some work to do, and work we will do, inshallah. Thank you for your attendance. Thank you to our esteemed panelists, and thank you for all those who helped to organize this. Have a wonderful night. Sallallahu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
Thank you very much to our panelists, Dr. Shabir Karmani, Zuhair Ladak, and our very own Brother Muhammad Rizvi. A great quote comes to mind after listening to Brother Rizvi from Imam Ali alayhi salam. We're either brothers in Islam or brothers in humanity, and we can either help each other or help others who are not with us. And coming from Brother Rizvi, we've grown up together. He's seen me as a little kid. I went to his FBI little school, and little did I know that he had this much connections. I'm just figuring it out now. It's a big lesson to learn from this first step that we are taking, that your brothers on your left or right, your sisters on your left and right, they may be able to help you. You may be able to connect together, and if together, we can make it through to the future. So thank you very much, our panelists. A big salawat for them, and thank you very much for coming today. As well as in the next room, in the meeting room, we have snacks, and we are cutting a birthday cake for our very own Brother Karmani's son. All right? And another thing, we had Brother Karmani come all the way. We had Brother Karmani come all the way from Florida.
Yeah.
And this is our last day with him, so we would like to give him a very big thank you for coming to Al-Khoei and giving us his time over here. And we have our very own New York people, so
I think you should thank them more. They came from Brooklyn.
yeah. So we just needed somebody from Florida to help us connect with people who are in our own state. So thank you very much. Thank you very much for that. And now we're going to do ziyarat, and we'll have snacks in the next room. Thank you.
السلام عليك يا رسول الله السلام عليك يا أمير المؤمنين السلام عليك يا خديجة الكبرى السلام عليك يا فاطمة الزهراء سيدة النساء العالمين السلام عليك يا سيدي ومولاي يا حسن بن علي المجتبى والحسين بن علي الشهيد بكربلاء وعلي بن الحسين زين العابدين ومحمد بن علي الباكر وجعفر بن محمد الصادق وموسى بن جعفر الكاظم وعلي بن موسى الرضا ومحمد بن علي الجواد التقي وعلي بن محمد الهادي النكي والحسن بن علي العسكري السلام عليك يا حجة بن الحسن القائم المنتظر المهدي يا صاحب العصر والزمان السلام عليك يا شريك القرآن السلام عليك يا إمام الإنس والجان عجل على ظهورك عجل على ظهورك يا ابن الحسن يا ابن الحسن عجل على ظهورك السلام عليكم